Well, good morning. I'm Sarah Harvey. I'm the Pre-Employment Transition Services Director for Vocational Rehabilitation Services with the Department of Human Services here in the state of Tennessee. I really appreciate you all taking the time this morning to learn more about pre-employment transition services. I also want to make sure to introduce a couple of people to you that are critical in the delivery of pre-employment transition services in our state. One of those is Yavanka Lewis-Brown. She's the Strategic Initiatives Director with VR, Vocational Rehabilitation, or VOC Rehab. And then Christy Hunt. She is a VR counselor. She is assisting us with the pre-employment transition services pilot in collaboration with the Jackson-Madison County school system in Jackson, Tennessee, which is on the west side of the state. So here we go, pre-employment transition services. What is pre-employment? Pre-employment is being required or accomplished before an employee begins a new job. It's a period of testing, processing before the start of employment. It's very different than what you think of in regards to typical vocational rehabilitation services. Pre-employment occurs before the job, and so this is going to happen during a student's course of their high school career. So what are pre-employment transition services? So just to give you a little bit of background information, pre-employment transition services are derived from the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It's a piece of federal legislation that was signed into law in July of 2014. And this is pre-employment transition services are outlined in Section 422 of that legislation. And within that part, there's 5 services that vocational rehabilitation state agencies are mandated to deliver to students age 14 to 22. Those 5 services, briefly, are job exploration, which is exploring the world of work and career choices, work-based learning, engaging in paid or non-paid work experiences, which can be in school or after school, workplace readiness, exploring options for students seeking careers that require post-secondary education, self-advocacy, helping the student learn more about themselves, the disability, and how to interact with the world, post-secondary counseling and enrollment assistance. So that's preparing the student for the workplace through educational means. This is a video to explain a little bit more about the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act.
Hello, this is Labor Secretary Tom Perez, and it's an honor to join my colleague Arnie Duncan to celebrate 1 year since President Obama signed the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act into law.
President Obama signed this landmark legislation to expand access to employment, education, training, and support services for all Americans, particularly for individuals with the greatest barriers to employment.
It represents a fundamental transformation in the way we prepare people for the careers of the 21st century. I like to think of this as our Eisenhower moment. Just as President Eisenhower made forward-looking investments in our physical infrastructure when he built the interstate highway system, today we're making historic upgrades in our skills infrastructure.
Changes in the law will lead to improvements in serving youth and adults with significant disabilities through the Vocational Rehabilitation Program, including youth transitioning from education to employment. And importantly, the law also will assist incarcerated individuals who are seeking to re-enter society and English language learners to participate more fully in the democratic process.
The O in WIOA stands for opportunity, and we are creating and expanding opportunities for millions of people nationwide. A young person who dropped out of high school can enroll in an apprenticeship program that puts him or her on a career pathway. A mom who lost her job in a downsizing can get the child care that allows her to complete training in a high-demand occupation. A local business person can meet his or her productivity goals by hiring an older worker and giving him or her on-the-job training.
My good friend, Secretary Perez, and I are optimistic about the future of this law. Now, more than ever, our most vulnerable individuals will have greater opportunities to achieve the American dream through education, training, and employment.
It's not just me and Arnie Duncan working together. It's also HHS and HUD, the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Energy, and Transportation, all of which have workforce programs. We're breaking down barriers, building on each other's best practices so we can provide better services to workers and businesses alike.
Together, with our partners at the state and local level, we can make a huge difference for individuals who experience the greatest barriers to employment by offering pathways to jobs and meaningful careers.
This is truly a watershed moment in workforce development, and I'm grateful to everyone who's playing an important part in it. I look forward to continuing to work with all of you as we implement WIOA and make that skills superhighway a smooth, successful ride for more and more people and businesses alike.
There's a lot of things that they say in the video that I think are really important and helpful. One, WIOA, WIOA, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, it includes pre-employment transition services, but it includes so much more than that. It is a massive piece of legislation. Yvanka, how many pages is it? Because I know you know this.
It's about 6,500 pages, and it's very legalistic. So if you like to read law things, you don't have anything to do over the long Memorial Day weekend, we can definitely send you the link. However, if you do go on the USDOL page, there's some great fact sheets that really break it down for you, so you don't have to try to figure out how to read that law. But I'll tell you, it is a very exciting time to be in this type of work, because for the bridge between WIA to WIOA, the biggest difference is in WIA, collaboration was suggested. It would be great if you did work with the school system and the Labor Department work with VR. Those are great opportunities and strategies. But over the 16 years it took to reauthorize it, they realized, okay, well, maybe we don't need to hint. We need to say, you will collaborate. This will happen. This is how we're going to work together, which is a great thing. I'll tell you, to be here in Tennessee, all of the collaboration that is mandated in WIOA, we were already doing. We were already working together. We were already in there together. But the law really gives us a stronghold to say, wow, we were going in the right direction. So now let's just capitalize on it.
Awesome. So again, I think this is a really good opener just to kind of begin the conversation in regards to Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, kind of familiarize yourself with it. And I love the statement at the bottom here that work is about more than making a living, as vital as that is. It's fundamental to human dignity, to our self-worth as useful, independent, and free people. And that's the way that we would like to think about employment, is that it's so much more than a paycheck. It's about quality of life. And so we see this as being so much more than just 5 services that we're providing students with across our state. So this is just to kind of give you a little snapshot about why pre-employment transition services are important within the state of Tennessee. Vanderbilt Kennedy Center did some data collection across the state, and they provided some of these statistics for us. In Tennessee, 75% of Tennesseans are employed. Those are Tennesseans without disabilities. Those who have disabilities, 28% are employed. That's a staggering statistic. That's quite a bit different. I will also say that those 28%, that includes those that are working full-time, part-time, for minimum wage, and for below minimum wage. So really that 28% needs a lot of support and strengthening within itself, in addition to needing to grow to become a much higher number. So pre-employment transition services is for students ages 14 to 22 who have disabilities. What we know, and this number is actually a little outdated, I believe it's from 2013, reported by the Department of Education, is that 46,000 of Tennessee's public school students ages 14 to 22 have an individualized education plan. 139,232, or 14% of all students within the Tennessee's public school system have a disability of some type. So here's the thing, we don't know exactly the number of students that we need to reach with pre-employment transition services, because it includes not only the 46,000 students that are ages 14 to 22, it includes all students ages 14 to 22. And so we're working to get an exact number to find out, how we're going to deliver this service to all of them. So here's the thing, after all those students exit the school system, where do they go? What will they do? Because we know that not all those students will be ready for school. Not all of them will be ready for work, because that's what we've been dealing with so far, correct? That we have students who we don't know what to do when the school bus stops coming. So we're trying to figure that out. And so I've talked to parents across the state about that, and they continuously use the very same terminology, which is really hard to hear, that parents describe when the school bus stops. It's like walking off the cliff because they don't know what to do or where to go. And so to me, that was really telling about the direction we needed to head in regards to pre-employment transition services. That not only did we need to provide these 5 services, we needed to be intentional about reaching parents and families and explaining to them and allowing them to really have a good foundational knowledge of services, systems, and supports, and do a much better job of that than we had been doing in the past. Here's some statistics as we look at our our indicator 13 and 14 indicators here in the state of Tennessee, and working with graduates who have intellectual disabilities, autism, or multiple disabilities. Who's working? Students without disabilities. This is a year after they've exited the high school system within the state of Tennessee. 52% of students without disabilities are working a year after they exit high school. 12% of students with those disabilities listed are working a year after high school exit. Who's in school? So a year after they exit the high school system, 48% of students without disabilities are going on to other educational opportunities, and only 6% of our students with significant disabilities are doing so. Again, those are staggering statistics that have to change. In order for us to move that 28% needle, those statistics right there must significantly increase. And so how to do that? Again, just to reiterate what Yovanka spoke to before, in WIOA, it's mandated that we collaborate. We've been doing that on the statewide level, and we do it on the local level too, but we wanted to really permeate down into the local level surface and bring strategic collaboration so that we could support and impact the lives of students with disabilities and really be intentional about clearing the path. And as we talk about the pre-employment transition services pilot that we've been performing in Jackson, Tennessee, we'll talk a little further about that. So just to explain a little bit about pre-employment transition services, it's for students who are ages 14 to 22 who have a disability. They can have an IEP, they can have a 504, or they don't have to have either. They have to have a documented disability. That's very, very different from typical VR services. Pre-employment and vocational rehabilitation are 2 different things. You may receive pre-employment transition services and never be eligible for VR services. Just because you receive pre-employment transition services does not mean you have applied for VR and will receive VR services. It's separate. You need to do an application process for that. So I just want to be very clear. Does anybody have any questions about that? And yes, ma'am.
So if you're a student who's 14 to 22, let's say you have an IEP, these services will become available to you. Is it an automatic thing, or does the student have to apply? And so schools are going to work together?
Oh, most definitely. And I'll tell you, you're going to hear a lot of this because, as we said, the law was signed in 2014, and the day the law was signed, the services were available. However, this was something that the VR program had never done. So on July the 23rd, they said, well, you should make this happen. Okay, how? Okay, so for the last 2 years, we've been trying to figure out how to do that. In the nation, there are 80 VR programs, and all of us are what are we supposed to be doing? We're still waiting on our final regulations from RSA, which is our federal arm that funds us. They've told us that the final regulations from the law will be done by June. And when we had our last meeting, they said, well, June does have 30 days. So we were like, okay, so you're gonna give them to us on June 31st. We got it. So we're trying to figure out how to make this happen without actual law, the regs to say this is how you do it. So one reason why we're going really slow, we have the one pilot site in Jackson, because what we didn't want to do is take our interpretation of the law, make rules and policies and give them to everybody statewide, and then the feds come in and say, oh no, that's not how we wanted you to do that. You know, because even in speaking with the other 80 programs, there's so many different ways that people are interpreting things and doing things, and we didn't want to give you something and then say, nope, that's not how to do it this way. So we are kind of taking it slow. We haven't decided how an application for pre-employment transition services is going to look. In the pilot, it's more of and Christy will help me if I say this wrong, it's more of a request for the services, and then we just get maybe some demographic information and some disability information, and then provide, the services.
Who's providing it, teachers or VR counselors?
For now, it is, the VR counselor is still the crux of the case, and it's case managing who's going to provide it. One step that we're working on right now is getting community rehab vendors to help us provide the services within the schools. Because one thing that we've told the schools, and we were telling everybody, and I'm sorry for taking over your presentation, and that we're telling everybody is we're not asking the people who are already doing it to just do more. We're kind of cherry on top with the school system and figuring out what they need and then providing those vendors to come in and do those services. So we're not asking the VR counselor or the teacher to do way more than they're already doing.
They would be doing it.
Right, we are getting with the community rehab providers and doing that, and even that is in a phased approach, because the same way we realize this is brand new to us, it is brand new to them too. So we're going to have phases to train and do things, because as VR professionals or as rehab professionals, it is not really in our purview to work with individuals so young. So we're going to have to train our staff and our vendors and everybody on how to do that, as well as how to have those crucial conversations with families. Because the big part about coming into the 14-year-olds is that you got to get in with their family also. Because sometimes this is the first time somebody has ever said,
Yes.
do you want to go to work?
Yeah, which is so hard for teachers.
Right.
Yeah, y'all are on the right track.
And you had a question here,
Well,
and
I
then
guess it's kind of very similar to that conversation, but coming from the school background, work-based learning transition, is there going to be a closer connection between WVL transition, the 6107, and what you guys are doing, and how do we get linked into that? I mean, is that
Yes.
something to come? Just wait,
Yes.
hear?
we are working with the Department of Education in regards to that. You will hear and see me frequently. I'm going to be at all the CTE and all the WBL, all of those in-services throughout the course of the summer. I have, I guess, a Tennessee road trip, basically across the state and back and forth a few times to spend time with all of those different educators to try to make sure they understand and are aware, so they know to be referring and asking for that assistance and to bring us in to the fold.
And will those services be offered through the site centers, the VR centers, or will some of those be offered through the school system? Is that the hope, that the connection is for those who are having to travel far? Like for Lincoln County, we don't have a VR center. There's
Right.
one in Bedford County and Franklin County, but for us, it's the school system,
Right.
because these families aren't going to be able to.
It will look different across the state because geographically there's different resources. There's different things that you have to think about, like rurality, urban, what is it that area presents? And so what are the challenges, what are the barriers, but also what are the resources, and the many things that we can actually tap into that are available, and trying to figure out the balance of that. Yes, sir, you had a question?
Well, I had a question. This lady may have answered that. Just my observation, like in the regional offices, and I'm an independent contractor. I work out of West Tennessee.
Sure.
They shrunk to about half size with the counselors, and the placement quotas on the counselors have soared to what they do. It just seems like a overwhelming and demanding load of the counselors. So I know this is a new program. How will they be able to effectively carry this on? And I mean, you kind of alluded to that, but it doesn't. But to effectively carry this on, when there's so many demands, and their caseloads have tripled in cases, and the staff is shrunk to half.
Some of the things that we've learned in the pre-employment transition services pilot is that we may not have always utilized our state partners to the fullest of their ability. And there's been a lot of changes with WIOA that allows us to really tap into them as resources. So in Jackson, what we have is a collaborative conversation. We hold that on a monthly basis, and we have all our state partners at the table. And this is not a my supervisor is going to your supervisor's meeting. It's actually the people who touch our customers, our clients, and actually work with them face to face. We get them at the table and they're sharing with each other and getting to know each other very well on a first name basis, and learn about their programs and their services and how to utilize them. For example, in Jackson, the Workforce Investment Board has been critical to our success because they too are heavily impacted by WIOA. And so we've been able to coordinate with them. They've come in and they've provided all of our 8th graders in that county with hot careers presentations and interest inventories. And so we've actually been able to expand and strengthen our capacity to serve through effectively utilizing those people who have expertise in other areas to bring to the table that we necessarily haven't tapped into before. And so that has been found to be very, very effective and very helpful, and it allows us all to work within our area of expertise. And we haven't necessarily always done that. I mean, right now we have educators who are trying to go out and find jobs or internships and work with businesses. Well, we have economic and community development at the table, and they're now partnering with VR and going out and meeting with businesses and making meaningful internship happen for these individual students, and taking that burden off of the educator and making a really meaningful opportunity for those students. And those are predictors of successful outcomes that are evidence-based by research on a national basis. So those are things that yes, we agree there's definitely challenges that we're faced with, but we've gotten very innovative and creative in how to address them because we know those challenges are always going to exist. So it's how can we overcome them together as a team when we all come together at the table, which is really exciting. Yes, ma'am.
As a current community rehab provider, we have a program that we have been trying to get into the school systems. So how do we contract with you to do that for this particular program?
Sure. So after the presentation, why don't you connect with me or Yovanka and make sure that we have contact information. We can discuss that. We'd be glad to do that with you. So I'm going to play this video.
Because my parents told me I have to be responsible.
Because my first coach told me, you can do this.
Because my teacher helped me see the choices.
Because my coach treated me like everybody else.
Because my boss showed me how to do a good job.
Because a mentor believed in my potential.
Is why I am where I am today.
I'm swimming faster than I ever dreamed I could.
I discovered that I could work as an artist.
I led my high school team to 2 championships.
I am a valuable employee.
I have a career that I am passionate about.
I will be whatever I want to be.
What can you do?
What can you do?
Like all young people, youth with disabilities should grow up expecting to work and succeed. For more information, visit whatcanyoudocampaign.org.
And so this slide is in regards to why are they effective, the pre-employment transition services effective. And just to speak a little bit about VR and what we bring to the table for educators and for our students. We're uniquely positioned to help youth with disabilities bridge the gap in their transition to adulthood. Our staff have connections and community partners that can be resourceful for youth. Because we typically have entered a student's life as they're exiting the high school system, we haven't necessarily always been available to provide that to students. But when we enter a student's life at age 14, we have so many more years that we're able to work with them and their family to make that happen. So we really anticipate to have success as a result of this effort. So just to talk a little bit about how we as a state are phasing in pre-employment transition services, we took a logic model and a 3-phase approach. And so the intent of this is to drive innovation, ensure high service quality, improve governance and transparency, reduce unintended consequences, and achieve specific measurable objectives that ultimately result in successful employment outcomes for Tennessee's youth with disability. We currently, because of the guidelines not coming out as soon as we had hoped for, we're currently in between phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 1 is explore service delivery approaches, collaborate with partners in pilot development and implementation. Phase 2 is build capacity, support, and commitment, provide information statewide and technical assistance to pilot, and evaluate the pilot for quality development of a statewide plan. And then phase 3 will be statewide implementation, providing technical assistance, quality evaluation, and assure sustainability. So when we receive these guidelines, we anticipate very quickly rolling out on a statewide basis. So we have worked very hard and diligently to ensure that we're prepared for that and that we're ready to roll as soon as we get the green light. So just want to talk a little bit about the pilot project. There has been so much that we have learned from this experience. It's been really, really helpful. We've had really incredible partners with the school system, with our state partners, and then we have a really great team down there who have been willing to just dive in and learn in regards to a service and providing services that we haven't ever done before, which is not necessarily easy to do. So initially, we reviewed various states' models for the pre-employment transition service delivery. So we looked at what are other states doing. Then we held collaborative meetings within our Division of Rehab Services, our program, DOE, and others. We performed a SWOT analysis. And then we reviewed available statistical data, research, policy briefs, emerging best practices, evidence-based best practices, in order to ensure the approach of PETS ensures high-quality service provision. So Jackson, Tennessee was selected. Many people tend to think that I'm a little biased because that's my hometown. But I promise I did not weigh in on that decision, but I was very excited when I found out that we would be there. Some of the reasons why we decided to go to Jackson was it was a collaborative decision with DOE, was they have a higher unemployment rate than the state average. So that presents some challenges and some barriers. There's a lower number of people competing for job openings, which does make it a little bit easier than maybe in some other areas of the state. There is a higher number of students considered economically disadvantaged. There's a higher percentile of students with disabilities who would actually be able to receive these services. And there's a higher percentile of students with various minority ethnicities. So when we came into the school system, we know that if we just barged in and said, we're here to run your transition program, that would never go over very well. What we decided to do was come in and say, we're here to help. And that actually seems to work a lot better. So what we did was we looked at, Christy was incredible in looking at the work that they are doing and how can we filter in pre-employment transition services and strengthen the work that they're already doing. Fortunately, they were at a time where they were transitioning over into what they're calling the Transition Academy, and they were changing so many things within their school system. They readily welcomed us to help create and innovate with them in that process. So we developed, like I talked about before, a local collaboration, and we decided to leverage resources in building capacity. So there's a lot that's been going on in the state of Tennessee at the state level in regards to increasing employment for people with disabilities. A lot of times that doesn't necessarily trickle down to the local level, or the big picture maybe might not be explained, or those resources might not be known, or that awareness might not be had. And so we were very intentional about making sure that our staff, as well as all our state partners, we all have a good understanding of what those resources are so that we can utilize them, because we do have a lot going on. I mean, at one point in time, we had 3 federal grants simultaneously in the state of Tennessee that worked towards employment, increasing employment. We were only one of 3 states in the nation who had this opportunity. And so we wanted to make sure that every opportunity was tapped into so that we could use that to our advantage in supporting students so that we could prepare them for adulthood. We've been very intentional about integrating evidence-based predictors of success. That's been very much so a focus. We want to make sure to tap into those because we can utilize that to help move the needle forward. And then information sharing with each other and with our families. So these are opportunities within the state of Tennessee that we've leveraged. And I will not go through all of these. So we utilize the Tennessee Longitudinal Data System, the Tennessee Works Partnership. Our governor signed an executive order in, what year was that, Yovanka?
2013, I'm turning 12.
Yeah, okay. The years are going by fast. Of course, a better bottom line, employing people with disabilities, the blueprint for governors occurred right in that same time range, and Governor Haslam's Drive to 55 initiatives within the 2011-2013 range. Then between 2013 and 2015, we had the Step Up legislation, the creation of the Employment First Task Force, which is now in its third year, I believe, and about to turn in its third report this fall. The Occupational Diploma, Skills, Knowledge, and Experience Mastery Assessment, the SKEMA, came about, and the Youth Memorandum of Understanding, which engages, I believe, 5 or 6 of our state departments in being intentional about our approach to supporting youth in transition. And then the Employment First Task Force. And then the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act was signed in 2014. Our state plan was submitted, it was due in March and submitted in April.
And it wasn't late, they gave everybody an extension.
Well, you can tell who worked on the plan and who didn't. Just saying. And the final rules I have expected in spring of 2016. We've been talking about that. That has been postponed only 3 times now. So that actually should say summer, but I haven't updated it because as soon as I update it, it'll change again. And so next steps. So next steps include for us rolling this out on a statewide basis, getting that green light and going, continuing to listen to parents and families, to our counselors, our partners at the table, our providers, as to how we can do what we're doing better in more intentional ways to increase employment for youth. So here's my contact information. Please feel free to contact me. I'm glad to listen to you and to try to be a resource to you. A lot of times I'm out of the office. I do a lot of traveling back and forth right now to West Tennessee, but again this summer I'll be all over the state. And so you might want to catch me on my cell phone. What questions do you have that I could possibly answer? A quiet room? What?
So the biggest thing that I can leave you with is stay tuned. Because we are changing quickly, things are happening. You'll be getting more information, especially if you are a community rehab provider, an independent vendor, because again, we realize that we cannot do this alone, and we absolutely need your expertise. There's going to be some opportunities, some RFP processes. So we're going to be sending those things out probably more towards the fall, but just be ready.
Absolutely. There are a couple of things to share with you. I have some flyers with me. If you'd like one of those, be glad to give you that, or I can also email it to you. So it's called the What is Pre-Employment Transition Services. It's kind of the who, what, where, why, when, quickie rundown of pre-employment transition services. Then we have a companion guide. It's about 39 pages. That I can also email to you if you want to touch base with me after this, and that will give you much more detail about the work that we're doing, definitions, acronyms, better understanding of kind of the phases, our pilot, and where, you know, how some of this was derived and where we're coming from in our approach. There's also, for anybody that's an educator, we understand that many times we speak the same language and a different language all at the same time. I may say functional limitations and you may have that doesn't interpret in the educator world, but yet we're actually talking about something that's the very same thing. I may be asking for one document and you call it something else, or, you know, we may be saying the same thing but using a different word for it, or saying 2 different things and using the same thing for it. And so we recognize that we have language barriers amongst ourselves within our professional fields. And so we've basically done a translator page on how to refer students to vocational rehabilitation for pre-employment transition services, so that our staff and your staff have a better understanding of what we're asking each other for to make that more efficient. We're also working on making that available for other fields. For example, the Department of Children's Services has asked us to do that for them, for their staff, using their terminology and our terminology, so that we can make that process more easily understandable and efficient. So we're excited about opportunities, and please, if you have suggestions like that, we're definitely open to them. This is a learning process for us as well. I saw a hand. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any funding attached to this? We've got to implement this, and so how do you do this with no extra money?
Yes and no.
I was about to say, do you work for the government?
Right. Yes and no.
The pre-employment transition services are funded through the regular VR grant that we've always gotten. The difference is that the pre-employment transition services is a 15% set aside of the entire VR grant. And if you are familiar with the VR grant at all, it is about an 80-20 match. It's really like 78 and 21 point blah, blah. But it's easier just to say 80-20. It's 80% federal funds and 20% state funds. And you get your federal funds by matching it with your state funds. Here in Tennessee, we've never received enough of a state allotment to draw down the full federal grant. However, the pre-employment transition services is 15% of the entire grant, whether you can fully match it or not.
Yes.
So it's a 15% set aside, but then once you set it aside, it cannot be used for any administrative cost. It is only to provide those 5 services. So the 15% can't be used for anything else but service provision. So that's how we fund it. So you'll hear us talk about that a lot. When we send out our RFPs and requests for proposals to do contracts to provide the services, you'll hear us talk about if you have a contract to provide pre-employment transition services, then you have to be sure you're only doing those 5 services, and that's it. So one of the things that we're waiting on in the final regs is, kind of some clarification of things. If an individual is 14 and receiving pre-employment transition services, but they need an accommodation or a support service to participate in that service, how would we provide that if they're not a regular VR client that we can pay for those things? So would they have to become a VR client so that we could do the accommodations, or would they let us do the accommodations with them? Those are the fuzzy things that we're waiting on the regs to figure out, but that's not gonna stop us. When I went to a national meeting, our commissioner of RSA, Ms. Janet LeBrec, she said, if you're not doing anything now and you're waiting on the regs, you missed the boat. So just, go ahead and do what you can and what you see that's in the law. Pretty much we're telling you to work with people younger and just kind of make that happen. And so we're building this plane in the air, so stay in the front.
What we do know is that it is critical that we utilize our partners and bring them to the table, because that way we can be very effective and efficient with our dollars, so that we can make them spread further, so we can reach as many students as we absolutely and possibly can, which is what's been so wonderful with this collaborative conversation, because one of the challenges was that we hadn't spent enough money. We hadn't spent very much money in it. Well, why hadn't we? Because we'd been utilizing our partners. They were so great at the table. And since when is that a problem, right? So we're really working on efficient government, because we want to make sure to reach all the students that we possibly can with the services. So that's exciting. Yes, sir. Yes?
Yes. Thank you. Just kind of running through my brain how to ask this.
Sure.
So the subject of my question is how to deliver instruction or training to an individual with intellectual disability. An example might be just a real basic not a resume per se, but just the idea of writing a resume, and then the idea of doing an interest inventory.
Right.
And my background is in regular education, so it's a real learning thing for me, and I run a job club for the Art Tennessee.
Right.
And so what I'm learning is that teaching somebody, an adult with an intellectual disability, these things is a lot like teaching first grade class, maybe, for the first something. And I'm just, so a question would be, where would you suggest that somebody like me go for good resources to use? Like, where are the lesson plans for that, that way?
So that's one of the beautiful yet challenging things about the work that we do. We work with individuals, and no one individual is alike. Everybody has different skills and abilities and brings different strengths and qualities and weaknesses to the table. And so how do you provide services to each and every individual and shape that to fit their needs so that they're successful? In the companion guide for pre-employment transition services, there's a list. Now, it is not certainly a full list of every resource out there, but it would point you in a lot of good directions. So I'll make sure to send that to you, because all of those resources for the 5 services are hyperlinked as well. Another good resource would be TennesseeWorks.org. So that would be another great. Sure, Tennessee Works. Oh, the companion guide with pre-employment transition service. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Any other questions? All right, and I didn't even get the 5-minute warning. That's a good thing. Great, but again, if you...
I'm busy asking my questions.
Oh, okay. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, suggestions, input, feedback, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to call on me. I appreciate hearing from people across the state. It's very helpful as we shape this. Thank you for your time.